Welcome to HeartChangeU live stream, where we explore all kinds of topics. And this summer on the Tuesdays, what we've actually done, we've been connecting with different ministries here, especially in the McPherson area, but beyond. We're connecting, obviously, with the Dream Center in Great Bend that does a similar work to what we're doing. And so we thank you for joining us and getting this opportunity to look into the community and different players in the community that are really bringing some good things and helping make this community better. Today we have with us STEPMC. Austin, it's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And Jackie, you're the sidekick, I guess, or are you the star player? Which way do we go here?
Definitely the sidekick.
You're definitely.
I was going to say star,
so
yeah.
we have that going on. We want to spend a little bit of time today just getting to know you, and I could jump in and say a few things, but I think I'll let you. Start. If somebody's out there, they're saying, "What is STEPMC?" Give them a quick thumbnail of what that looks like and what you're doing, what you're bringing to the community.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, so Steps to End Poverty of McPherson County, or STEPMC, was founded in 2010 by a group of folks right here in McPherson who saw that there were folks who were struggling and knew that the support that we were offering at the time, which included, food banks and toy drives at Christmas and school supplies in August, they saw that those things were helping people but not helping people long term. And so they wanted to create something that would maybe a little bit similar to Omega Project creates, or Live Free Ministries creates, some heart change for folks. And so they founded Steps to End Poverty of McPherson County, and the whole goal was to try to fill in the gap between when people have stable housing and enough food to eat, but are still really struggling to survive, the gap between there and actually thriving in our community. And so what they created and what they partnered with Circles USA at the time with was this model that really focused on creating hope for folks and creating some heart and mind changes to help people overcome poverty once and for all.
It's kind of cool. You did all of that and you even threw us a bone. You incorporated the heart change language into what you had to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we might go into this a little more later, but I think that's part of the reason that our models work, is because they're not just focused on giving people a one and done sort of resource, but they're focused on helping people grow and learn and come to a point where they can continue that change themselves.
You and I were talking right before the program began, and I talked about a spiritual model. And one of the things that I talk about in a spiritual model, a lot of times people see conscience as an angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other shoulder. And so you've got this kind of natural thing. And one of the things that I've seen in Scripture is that our conscience can be shaped. It can actually be shut down. It can be killed off. It can be shaped in a particular direction. And one of the concepts we talk a lot about is normal. So wherever your normal is, your conscience is going to drift to that spot. And when you try to step to a new place, it's going to feel wrong to go to that place. Now, in the whole idea of poverty, it's interesting when you look at the different cultures. There is a very distinct rich class culture. There is a very distinct middle class culture. There is a very distinct poverty culture. And what's interesting, it actually feels wrong to begin to behave in ways that don't line up with whatever your normal is. Again, that's my language. I doubt that Steps actually use that exact piece of language, but the concept is very much the same.
Yeah, we utilize some of Ruby Payne's Bridges Out of Poverty model, and that model divides our society into three categories: wealth and middle class and poverty. And it does talk about how there are these cultures that we survive in, and it's not just about the amount of money we have, but there's so many of these other pieces, or what we call hidden rules, that keep someone stuck in the place that they are, not just folks in poverty or in addiction, but also folks in the middle class or folks in wealth. And I think one of the things that STEPMC is really trying to do is build relationships across those economic lines so that we can see into other people's worlds. And I think when we're able to do that, we're able to change.
What's interesting, we talk about the solution to addiction is to draw strength from God, draw strength from godly people. When I look at your model, to me, that's one of the most powerful things is you're getting people engaged from the community. You're creating relationship between the different people. If you can establish non-judgmental relationship, stop. Now, what did I talk about? Conscience. If I don't get the non-judgmental relationship, all of a sudden the poverty people are judging the middle class or the rich or whoever it is they're doing. It's just instinctive. It comes out of their conscience. They begin to do that. But if I can break that down and I can get the relationship piece first, then we start that connection. And now all of a sudden I can hear you speaking. It's just an incredibly powerful piece. Our entire culture could stand a little bit of this. But at any rate, that's how I see your model working, and it's, again, a very powerful piece.
Yeah, I resonate with that completely. Yeah.
So I haven't done you injustice so far.
No, most definitely not. No.
Jackie, you came in, and obviously you were a part of the Omega Project, so some of this stuff that I'm spewing off right now, you actually are a little bit familiar with that.
I'm a lot more familiar.
Yes, you're very familiar. But then you jumped into the STEPS program. What was it about the STEPS program that just resonated with you and began to reach inside of you, wake you up in ways that were positive?
To be honest, from the beginning, it was the group of people in poverty that were hanging out there. Not just because they were hanging out there and that felt normal, because these were my people and I grew up in a poverty culture the majority of my life, but like things were happening for them, good things, and they were like growing into the community further past like volunteer work or going to the grocery store and recognizing someone from the community that happened to volunteer for somewhere they were at, and seeing the difference that it made in their lives, and like not just in the manner of like they were getting their bills paid and they were getting like help in that sense, but like they were learning to do the things that it took to get them, one, out of the poverty mental conundrum of thinking that everything was this horrible emergency, which I still do on occasion, but also like realizing that there are steps that you can take and moves that you can make in your life to prevent those things. And like not just that, like you build this community of people from that poverty culture, and like you grow together with your neighbors, so to speak. And like you gain knowledge together as an entire culture that you've created inside of this building over the course of a few months. And it's almost eerie to watch the small amount of time that it takes for people to go from like one mindset to the next. And I say mindset loosely because like I think that poverty can be a mindset that you can be stuck in, but like I also think that you can change a lot of those things and learn to act and think and process things differently, and it makes a huge difference. It made a huge difference in my life.
It's interesting how egoistic we are, and one of the phrases that I use a lot of times is you have to have obedience before you have understanding, and a lot of people resist that. I can remember one person in particular, I'm not doing anything until I fully understand it, okay? But because we're so egoistic, we tend to A, understand, B, defend, all the different things wherever our feet are. So I love what you talked about. You came in, your people were there. So when you first came in, it was your people that attracted you to the mix. And so, okay, we don't downplay that. You got to have your people. If you don't have your people, you don't have a comfort zone. If you don't have your comfort zone, you don't have the security to connect. If you don't connect, whoa. Now all of a sudden, what did you describe? I began to connect. Now, what did I talk about? We tend to think inside of where we are spiritually. Once I begin to connect with that person, my defenses come down. My whole egoistic defenses begin to come down, and I can actually have real discussions and connect with these people and see them in the community. That's a life-changing piece. And again, our culture totally believes in what I call an education model, which I write books, okay? I believe in understanding. I believe in stuff. So I'm not putting that down. But this connection model is so incredibly powerful. Once that starts, I get the connection first, and then I actually start hearing second. Am I off base? Is that how it happens?
The relationships that are built from the very, very beginning are exactly what makes our program work the way it works, because when I was in Omega, we got accountability partners, and that was my first connection to the program. And then having the conversation with you at one point where you let the majority of us know, like, not everybody's accountability partner is going to make it, and that's okay. And like having the realization after leaving Omega that not only were you right that not everyone's accountability partner was going to make it, but they needed to be there to have that connection in order to later on grasp onto the program and find and have the trust enough in another human being in order to grasp onto another human being and be okay with whether they burned you or not.
Austin, I'm going to bounce back to you. When you think about, let's just think about poverty, and I'm trying to move out of poverty into better mindsets. So we were just talking about accountability. There are certain types of things, if I get into these kinds of patterns, if I start making these kinds of decisions, whoa, it's going to start changing things. And Jackie, the accountability piece that you talked about was important there. You started to learn a new lifestyle. As you think about someone in the poverty lifestyle and they're needing to break out, what are the most important, I'll use her word, but you don't have to stay with that, accountability? What are the most important compliance? What are the most important mandatory do this type steps that you feel like are most important for someone who's in that poverty cycle and needs to break?
Yeah. So I guess, first of all, I'd preface by saying I've never come out of poverty myself. So there's a lot of gaps in my understanding of what that process can look like. And I think that's one of the things that we tote as a core belief at STEPMC, is that we believe people in poverty have the expertise on what that process can look like. And I have seen a lot of folks come out of poverty through our program or stay stuck. And so there are a couple things that I would respond to your question with. One is hope, right? Like if I'm a single mother and I saw my grandma work 2 or 3 jobs and knock it out of poverty, and then I saw my mom do that same rat race, and I tried, for 10 years of my life to work several jobs, and still nothing has changed. I'm still struggling. At some point, I might just decide I'm giving up. It's my destiny to live in poverty, and nothing that I do will change that, which is a very, very different belief than what middle class culture oftentimes believes, which is that my actions today change my future. And then I think that's one place that we really see people in poverty and people in middle class butting heads on, is that middle class judgment we have is, hey, like get off your tushy, get a job. And middle class people are just saying, it's my destiny. It doesn't matter what I do. So I think that's one big thing I see, and a needed shift for some folks is just the belief that, oh, maybe I can actually change my future. That'd be one piece. I think another thing that we see oftentimes is that when people are struggling or when they're in addiction, they oftentimes slip into what we call tyranny of the moment, which is when our need to act right now to survive, that overwhelms our ability to think or plan long term, or maybe connect with our like the spiritual goodness that I hope is within all of us. And I think when we see people stuck in tyranny of the moment, then they're making decisions that are purely based on survival, and they're emotion-based decisions. Like if we talk about psychology, then we're talking about being, in our amygdalas rather than our prefrontal cortexes. And so the result of that is I get my paycheck and I am going to do what is going to make my life a little better right now, which might be taking my kids to the zoo, even when I don't have money to pay off my credit card bill. And again, that tyranny of the moment is so different than what middle class people oftentimes think or believe. So I guess those would just be a couple of things I would note, like the time horizons that we see differently as middle class versus poverty populations, as well as our belief in like what is our destiny, or how do our actions affect the future. Those are a couple of things I see, at least. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's a high comparison to drug culture. And of course, in drug culture, you have a high incidence of poverty. So of course, the two of them, there's a lot of crossover. But one of the first things that I learned and tried to institute program-wide, not everything's an emergency. In fact, very few things are an emergency. I know when we first started the program, it's like, okay, any usage was red alert, we're going to stop everything, I'm going to come running, etc. And at this point, it's like, no, stabilize the situation. It'll still be there in the morning. We'll pick up with, etc. Just the de-escalation of emergencies, and you called it tyranny of the urgent. That de-escalation of that, because when I escalate, I create a new level of emergency that's going to be much more ongoing. And then I would throw out the word fatalism, but there's kind of a fatalism in poverty and in drug culture that no matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference. So I'm not willing to give it that long game. And again, in the drug program, that's one of the things that we hammer over and over. It's going to take longer than you think. Slower is faster. I mean, we use a lot of different phraseology to try to get that mindset going, because if we again teach sowing and reaping, Luke chapter 6, what given it shall be given unto you. The most powerful tool you have to change your life is what's coming out of you, what's flowing through you, that kind of language. And so we talk about that. Poverty culture doesn't believe that. It's a belief system. They don't believe that. So as you said, I don't believe that if I wait a week and stretch this out, I believe it's going to be gone a week from now. So I'm going to go enjoy it today.
Yeah. Jackie, I guess I'm curious to hear some of your perspective, being someone who's is working to come out of poverty.
Well, funny, I dealt with that this week. I feel like I call it dramatic. We're just all dramatic. People from drug culture and people from poverty culture. We can do it with the smallest thing. I had a fan motor blow out on my van this week. Not really a big deal. I had the money for it. I really didn't want to spend the money for it. And in my head, I was like, I'll just wait till my paycheck. But then that means I don't go to work all week. And I gave myself 24 hours because, in my recovery culture, I make decisions irrationally if I make them too quickly. So after waiting 24 hours and making the decision and realizing the simple answer is the answer. And I think that Austin and I were talking earlier, I think that's the biggest difference in my change in thought process is I have a thought process. I allow myself the pause to create the thought process that leads me to be able to have choices in my decisions and not just this is the only answer. And if I don't do this answer, then that's what I'm going to do. I don't think me personally, but I've seen other people in the program have issues with their vehicles, and it's a tyranny of the moment thing, and watch them not go to work and then also go take out a extremely high interest loan from a pay here place. And then that creates the next tyranny of the moment. And they don't realize at that time, because they're in such a panic, that that's going to create an even bigger tyranny of the moment issue 6 months down the line.
Yeah, my social warrior side comes out whenever you say anything about payday loans and that sort of thing, because we've had such horrible experiences with that, and you're just like, I'm going to hurt somebody. Either you, which I might as well go with you because I can't shut the industry down, but I'd like to shut the industry down. I mean, the payday loans and that sort of thing, that's just a menace, and it is ugly. So anyway, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's get a little bit more to the practical side. How do you get involved with STEPS, and what kind of involvement would you like to see, et cetera?
Yeah, so if you're somebody who's struggling or would like to change your life, then I'd invite you to reach out to one of our coaches. Right now we have 2 sites, one in Mound Ridge and one in McPherson. And Sherry Rickerson is the coach in McPherson, and Rebecca Dara is the coach in Mound Ridge. And so you can go onto our website and fill out a form, and you could say, hey, I could use some assistance.
Repeat the website.
Yeah, the website is just www.stepmc.org.
Step, single, no
Yeah,
S.
yeah, just
Because we keep saying steps, so
Yeah.
STEPMC.
Yeah, STEPMC.org.
Okay,
Yep.
very good.
Yeah, so that's probably the easiest way to get involved. Or if you know someone involved in the program, ask them about it, and they can help connect you as well. If you are somebody who would like to volunteer or give time or resources, then our website's also a place you can start for that. Or you can send me an email at director@stepmc.org. And some of the options for folks, you could help with our kids. We meet on Thursday nights in McPherson and on Monday nights in Mound Ridge. So always looking for people who love working with kids and who want to make a difference there. You can also cook a meal for us. We provide a meal every time that we meet every week for our folks. And a lot of times we have church groups or book clubs or businesses who will sign up and do a meal together. Or you can, of course, give money. That always helps nonprofits out. So yeah, those are a couple options that people can get involved.
I've known at different times where it seemed like, okay, this is an open enrollment time. Feel free, jump in. You've also had times where, hey, this is a session, so no, you can't come now. Describe how that works.
Yeah, so the first step for someone entering into our program is a 24-week course called Getting Ahead. And in that course, we talk a lot about what poverty looks like. We lean a lot on the expertise of the folks coming into our program because, again, we don't have all the answers on what poverty looks like in our community. We have some expertise, but not all of it. And so, yeah, that's a time where people can come together and really talk about what are they struggling with, what would they like to change, and we also provide, like a book. It's, yes, again, based off of Ruby Payne's work.
So
to talk about those.
At that point, it's in every 24 weeks that you're allowed to come in, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, yeah, right now we've got a 24-week course, and then there's usually kind of a transition period where we have our, 5 or 6 weeks of programming that is focused on getting those folks involved in the next step of our program, which I can go into later. And then, yeah, if we have a full roster for a next class, which typically ranges from 10 to 15 folks is what we're looking for to start another class, then we'll go ahead and start that class.
So people in the program would go through the 24-week course. Then what happens after that?
Yeah, so after that 24-week course, then you move into stage 2, which is what Jackie's in right now. And that is a 1.5 year intentional friendship between someone who's working to get out of poverty, which we call a team leader, and then 2 to 3 middle class or folks in wealth, folks who aren't in poverty, and we call those folks team partners. And the whole goal there is that you're just building supportive relationships with one another. So the middle class people, oftentimes they're not mentors, or they're not showing you the way out of poverty, because most of the time those folks have never exited poverty themselves. And then what I think really happens in that relationship is that you start to see the world in a different way, right? We're talking about building relationships and how sometimes you have to build that trust before you can learn. And so, Jackie, I'll have you talk a little bit about your partners too, I think. But yeah, what I see happening is that, there's always this kind of awkward transition time where you're learning who the other person is and kind of feeling them out, because those aren't relationships that we typically make, right? Folks in poverty typically are friends with other folks in poverty or in addiction. And folks in middle class oftentimes aren't friends with people with lip piercings who just got out of prison and, were doing heroin a year ago. And so I think, yeah, it's this cool space where we're facilitating those relationships across economic lines. And what we see is that both folks in poverty start to change some of their mindsets and see how a middle class world could be navigated. And also the other way, we see people in middle class who maybe a couple of years ago would have only been judgmental about folks in poverty, and I would say they shift towards what I would say is a little more Christ-like view of other humans, saying like, hey, you're still a full human, and maybe you were born into a really tough situation, or maybe you made choices that you wish you wouldn't have made now, and I can still love you and see you as a human and be your friend. I'll tell just one quick story about some of the other benefits of those relationships. So we have a lady in our Mound Ridge program named Alyssa, who was really struggling to get a bank account. Comes from an addiction background, and her credit, was very poor, as is, I would say, a lot of folks who are coming out of hard situations. And so, she went to the bank and asked for a bank account and was denied. And just that was a big barrier for her. And one of her intentional friends, one of these team partners she had, his name's Rick Crable, and he's the retired CEO of the Mid-Kansas Credit Union in Mound Ridge. And so, one day Rick hears Alyssa talking about this barrier of not being able to get a bank account. And Rick says, like, hey, why don't you come with me? We'll see if we can figure this out. So Rick and Alyssa walk into the Mid-Kansas Credit Union. And when your retired CEO of your organization walks in there with you, what do you think Alyssa walked out with? She walked out with a bank account and a loan. And I think that's just one example of how those relationships can be really beneficial to someone who's struggling as well, who doesn't have that social capital otherwise.
Amen. It's a great illustration. And we really, a lot of times I say you can't give away what you don't have, and you don't have what you haven't received. And in that particular instance, she needed help. She needed to be able to receive from the outside. It's a great point. Jackie, he threw the ball your direction. You want to pick up on that?
Well, I got 3 partners. Thought it was because I was in trouble.
Well, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Was 3 enough?
3 is definitely enough.
We have that relationship. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
3 is definitely enough. I've definitely been able to enjoy watching their growth also, and like I'm too close to me, so I don't get to see my growth. I can look at that on paperwork through like my goal setting sheets and the numbers that I keep track of for like all of the things that I get to do with them, and I get to allow them to be a part of. And like that was part of building the trust, is like building the trust with the next class of people that I've always felt judged by. So these 3 partners and we meet at the senior center every Wednesday for lunch, and like at this point we just call each other friends. Like for a long time there was that awkwardness that Austin was talking about, and there was a lot of, I'm not sure if they got more entertainment out of my life story, or if like, I know they were genuinely interested, but like I've been hectic most of my life. And it's really funny to watch them use the things that they've watched me grow through in their own personal lives, because there's a lot more similarities to middle class problems as far as life goes and poverty problems. We just deal with them differently. And like to be able to have the perspective from both ends and be able to share that with 3 people that otherwise 2 of my partners were already friends and one of them wasn't. So like they have to build a friendship too. And it's really cool to kind of watch that take place while they're watching like each friendship take place with me, and then come back as a unit. I want to say couple, but there's 4 of us, but like come back as a unit and like discuss like, hey, what have we learned this week? This is what we're doing. This is what our goal is for next week. And they've gotten to watch me go from having the fate mindset, like my parents did this. This is how it's going to go. My grandparents did this, and this is the life I'm going to live. 2, I woke up and bought a house. I got a car, switched cars, started building my career, signed up for school, got a savings account in my name on purpose, and legally obtained every single one of those things with my name on it. So like now not only do I have these partners that I don't want to say indebted, but like I have this foundation built with people and not just things. So like I won't want to run from that, and I have it with not just them, but like the Omega program started that. Like it started my foundation, and I knew in the program that if I didn't branch out, I wasn't going to make it. And that's where my other recovery program came in, and also where STEPMC came in. And like literally this is my community, and I don't think that there's anything at this point that could make me give it up. I've built family here that's not blood, and my children have flourished in this town. And like that was my biggest thing, is like STEPMC has a space for our children, whereas people in poverty, like we leave our kids with their aunt that has only known them 3 weeks, because we have to go to work. But like also like we have some kind of trust there because of the poverty mindset. we have volunteers at STEPMC that are like, hey, we'll take your kids after you eat. And I'm like, are you sure you want mine? But also at the same time, like they build trust with our children to the extent to where we feel safe enough to take this class and learn these things without the distraction. And it's, if you come on Thursday night and you break bread with us, and sit and talk to the people in poverty and sit and talk to our partners and just be a fly on the wall, you'll see the community that is built inside of that room. When you sit back and you look at it, it's phenomenal.
I would have to say one of the things that we found, the relationship with Reuse It, the relationship with Save and Share, the relationship with churches, the relationship with you guys. A good block of our people are attending your program right now. Anything you can do to expand those relationships and the connection that you're describing gives a person another layer of resources. And I'll go back to what I said about philosophy. In our culture, it's drug education, it's this education, it's that education. The power of relationship is so incredibly important, and that's what you're describing. And so you guys really do a great job of majoring on that and working with people in that. I feel like our calling obviously is much more intense, much more focused. I mean, we're taking people at a very crisis point in time, and so we're having to really focus on that at a much higher level. And then if we can get them to connect with various groups, I mean, that's part of why we're doing what we're doing this summer. We really are identifying partners that have helped, are helping, are making a difference. And so certainly thank you guys. I think I want to kick it another direction here, just kind of open it up. Is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of STEPMC that we have not covered yet?
Man, I guess one thing that's just always on my heart to share with folks is that we've got some really amazing people in our community who are stuck, whether that's in poverty or addiction, folks who are brilliant and they're hardworking, and for whatever reason, whether it's a situation or choices, right, they're stuck right now. I guess I use the analogy of, I would say we've got these diamonds in our community that right now, like, there's dirt covering those diamonds up, and that dirt, right, is all these struggles that folks are facing. And I think that if we start to build relationships with folks and pour energy into helping folks overcome poverty, overcome addiction, overcome whatever struggle that might be, I think it just does so much to improve our community. Like Jackie serves on our United Way board right now and can provide some expertise on, hey, all these organizations you serve, like, this is how it actually affects people's lives, and that's why it's so important. Or I would tweak this one little thing and it would be so much better. I think like that's one example. I mean, I think you probably also get to see that here, right? Like we have these amazing people who we know are capable of so much, and so like you and I also get the opportunity to hire some of those folks onto our staff, and get to see all that growth and get to see their hearts. And I think the other thing is, like, folks whose lives change, they have so much energy to give back to helping other people too. So I guess I just want to, encourage whoever might be watching or listening to this to believe us when we say that, like, there are some really amazing people out here that we don't know about yet, and if we help them or serve them, that might be one way to get them more involved.
I'd say it this way: genius almost always is a bit eccentric. And eccentric at that point has a hard time blending with culture, has a hard time fitting, and at some point that ends up being pushed away to a point to where the self-hatreds, or whatever you want to call it, those things rise to the surface, and then you've got anger and you've got insecurity, and next thing you know, as you say, you've got a diamond there. You've got someone who really is genius, who really has some high-level giftedness. Many times it's people with very high levels of giftedness that end up in drug culture, and you're like, how does that work? But it just does.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say the folks who are working hard to overcome those things too are typically folks that are really amazing and have a lot of strengths.
Amen. One more time, just your website info or whatever. If they want to be in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to go to our website at www.stepmc.org. And there's a contact us form there that'll give you some ways to become involved. Or if you know one of our staff members, feel free to talk with us. We're always happy to talk about the work we do and how to get involved.
We always find it's word of mouth. People say, hey, what do you do? I've never advertised, never had to advertise. I mean, it's just if you're effective in what you do, it's, yeah. And so just obviously the website is there. Check that out, be a part of it. But more than anything, it's about people and connecting with people. Jackie, any final words? It's dangerous to turn it loose to you, but I shouldn't give you a hard time on the public right here. But what else you have to say?
Well, STEPMC is putting on a garage sale this Saturday until noon. So if you want to find some cool things or just rummage through the things that the community has brought to show off, it's fun.
The
It's
location
always,
and the hours?
at First United Methodist Church. I believe we start at 7 and then it will go on until noon.
Great opportunity to support the organization.
Support the organization, support the leaders.
To work with that.
The money actually goes towards the Getting Ahead emergency fund that is provided for them to kind of ease any tyranny of the moment situations that might occur during their 24-month span of being in Getting Ahead. So
Excellent. Well, it's been. Oh, go ahead.
Well, just before we close, I just want to make sure to shout out you as well on all the work that you're doing in this community, because we see it changing lives, right? We've got a good amount of overlap in the folks who come to our program and the folks who are involved and invested, right, in the work that you do. We see their lives changing, and we're just very grateful for all the work that you do and all the time that you specifically have poured into the McPherson community over the last, 23 years now, 25 years?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
We actually moved back in 1986. If you really want the full picture, I started pastoring in '89, and we started the Omega Project in 2006. So,
Well, I'm grateful for all the work you do. I'm grateful for our friendship, and hope it continues.
Well, thank you so much. And again, it's been a privilege. Just when we first started this, actually, I think the first one that hit our radar was Great Brand and the Dream Center that saying, look, we're trying to restart of the program. Can you help us? And I said, well, okay, let's create a space. And then my brain got going, and so we've been creating space all summer to give people a chance to do this and to really tell their story in a way that hopefully makes the community better. Thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate both of you. Thank you for joining us. We do hope to have a reel produced soon, and so you'll be able to do that if you want the really short version, but pass it on. Let other people know about what's happening in the community, all of the different things. This wasn't just informational in terms of, hey, tell about STEPMC, but hopefully you're gaining some insight in terms of what does it take for a person to get heart change, to grow and to get better. Even during these sessions, we're telling a story and we're explaining what works. And so thank you for joining us. Pass the message on, and we will see you next time. Just a quick reminder, we won't be here on Friday, so we'll join you next Tuesday, and we look forward to being with you again on HeartChangeU live stream.